Hi guys, I hope you've been well. I wanted to do something different and a little more fast paced for this video. This might actually help students and beginners in the React front-end interview preparation process. We'll be creating a to-do app, which is a popular choice for a live coding round at front-end positions. This would be obviously for React. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so we would be using the Visual Studio Code editor. I'm going to open up a terminal here. The shortcut to do that is Control tilde, and we will be using the npx command with the create react app package, and we'll name our app to do and hit enter. Okay, looks like there has been an update on the package. So apparently I have an older version which is globally installed for the create react app, and I might have to uninstall it. So let's do that. Let's try it again. Okay, in this case we might have to clear the cache. X cache. See if that works. We'll need that package also, so I'll hit Y. Okay, and I'll go back and try this. Install the package. Okay, looks like we are good to go. So what it'll do is create a to-do folder within which it will install the boilerplate for a basic React app which we can build on top of. So I'll just wait for this to finish. Oh, apparently I don't have sufficient space on my disk. I know that I have a lot of space in the B drive, so I'll switch to that. I'll create a folder called YouTube, cd into that folder, and then now I'll try to run the npx command and see if we can get a to-do app with the boilerplate React app. Shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. Alright, looks like we're good to go. And if we ls in this folder, we'll see that there would be a folder called to do, and let's cd into that folder, get out the console, and we will have to open that folder since we switched from the terminal, and select this folder, and there we have it. Okay, the terminal is up open here, and inside the to-do folder we have our boilerplate React app. And if you're not already familiar with this, the majority of the code from the boilerplate comes in the src folder, which is the source folder. This is the root component where we will find the code for the home page. So if I were to run this, and by the way, this command will be found under scripts in the package.json file. So this should be npm run start, and if I run this, we are not in that folder, so we need to cd into to do, and I'm pretty sure it's npm run start. So if I just run that, yep, it will load up a development server, and it should show up in the browser, which opened up on the screen, and this is what it will look like. Now that we have a development server running, if we make changes to anything here, it should reflect in the browser. So I'll just go ahead and delete all of this stuff and just type in hi. So this should be picked up as text, and we should see that show up right here. Okay, so we know that this works. Alright, okay, let's get rid of that. Now, what do we need for a to-do app? We will have to start with an input box with a save button. The next thing would be a list of all the to-dos, and within that list we might have a delete button. That's at least what we would need for the UI. So let's put this in comments for now, and we'll start with adding the inputs for a box and a button. So I'll go ahead and create a div within which I'll have an input element. I'll specify the type as text because this will take the input for a task or a to-do. Let's say the placeholder for this input box would be enter to do. By the way, we are not focusing on the CSS for this exercise, so we might as well just ignore everything. Let's just focus on the functional aspect of it, because that's what most interviews will be focusing at also. Okay, so the next thing would be to add an input box for a button. So we'll do type button, and then in the second input box there'll be no placeholder here, but we'll have a value, let's call it save. And if we save that, we have our input box and a save button. Let's open up another div which will have our list. Okay, and since I removed the unused import, all the warnings have also gone away. All right, now to begin with, we will need some sort of data which will already be there. So since this is going to be a mock of a to-do app, let's just use some random data. So I'm just going to copy paste in this right here. I'll call it original data, and this is you could call it a fake JSON object with some to-dos in an array. So you'll just use this original data array of objects in our app. Now, since this is a functional component and the norm is to use functional components, we will be using React hooks. And by the way, this data here is usually a JSON, but for the sake of an interview, they might just give you an array of text values instead of objects here. So you can also work with that, but doing it with the objects is usually what you would see in a real-time scenario. Okay, so first of all, we will need a list of to-dos which are already there. So consider that this is an array of objects of to-dos which is coming from the database, and we are, say for example, trying to fetch data from the database and show it on the UI. So since this is a mock, we will just be using this data directly here, and the way to post it inside JSX would be using these braces, and we will be using the original data dot map, and for every, let's call it to do, we would want to say return a particular row. So to return a row or one to do, let's just do this for now. So for the number of elements in the original data array, we will see this div occurring that many times, because that's what map does. It's a higher order array function. If you see the definition, it says it calls a defined callback function on each element of the array and returns an array which contains the results. I'll leave the documentation link in the description. I mean, if you want to check out more, and let me know if you want a detailed explanation, and I can make a separate video of higher order array functions, but that's out of the scope for this video. Let's just say some text here, right? So if we do that, we will see this 3 times, since this array has 3 objects, right? So it iterates over every element in an array, and it will return this for the number of times. But this is not what we actually want, right? So this is the actual data which we consider to be coming from the database. So what we'll do is we'll define a local state, and we'll be using the useState hook. I'll use a snippet, and we'll call it data, and we'll initialize this with the original data. And since we will be making changes to this data, this is what we would want here. Okay, it says usage is not defined, so we are going to have to import that. Use state from React, and I believe that should fix this. Okay, the reason that we don't see anything on the page is that original data is an array and I've initialized that as an object, so that's a mistake, and I believe we should be able to see that now. Okay, why do we see this only once? So this is a warning, so we can ignore that for now, but it says data.map is not a function. I don't think we will need to specify this either, so I think that should fix it. There we go. So we actually don't want a static text here, right? So we want the title of that particular to-do. So what we'll do next is, instead of this text value here, we will be using the to-do.title value. This to-do would be a single element from the data array, right? So if we do that, go and save, we get all the titles from every to-do from the original data object array. Just to make it a little more functional, let's put this in a span, and let's define an other span, which will be our delete button, if you will. I'm just going to go ahead and use the X letter and see how this looks. All right, there we go. Actually, to make it a little more distinct, we might as well add some styling to the to this letter here. So the way to add style would be 2 parentheses, and we want to add color. Call it, I think red should be appropriate. Save, and there we have it. So we have these are ugly looking delete buttons for every to-do, which is a mock of the data that's coming from the DB onto the UI. And if we go to the console, refresh it, we will see that we have this warning, which says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So to get rid of that warning, we'll go ahead and add this key. This key is supposed to be unique, so it is usually a unique ID which a particular element object has. So in this case, we have to-do.id. Sometimes the ID could be redundant. Instead, we might as well use the title or anything that's unique. For now, I'll just use ID, and if we refresh the page, we'll get rid of that. And alternatively, we could also do this, which is not really recommended, but for the sake of an exercise, we might as well just use the index. All right, now that we have our template or the structure ready, we next want to make it functional. So if I were to type something here and click the save button, I want that to be added to the list. To be able to do that, we'll have to hook an on-click event onto the save button. So we'll go ahead and add an on-click event and call it add to do. So we're going to have to define a function here, and note that we should not call the function here like that, so that it will get executed here. So we don't want to do that. Now, when we would click this button, we want something to be added to this list. So we will have to update the state that we've defined here. So we'll use this function, and within that function we'll have to update this array in the same format. So we'll copy the existing contents from the data array, that is, and I'll go ahead and copy this because it's going to be the same structure. I'll write something else here, and I'll go ahead and clear this. Now notice that if I type anything here, the thing that will be saved is something else that we have typed in here. So this is currently hard-coded, or this is currently static. So what we want to do is, instead of adding in text here, we want to use the text within the input box, get that text and add it to the list. To do that, we would need a mechanism to hook onto DOM elements and fetch the data within them. So in this case, what we want to do is hook onto this input box here and get the value within it and use it somewhere else in the app. So what we'll need is another hook by the name of useRef, which lets us do just that. We'll go ahead and initialize this and call it input ref. You could call this anything. Use ref, initialize this with null, and we'll use this ref that we're creating and hook onto the input box here like that. So the ref attribute will take the reference that we just defined. And now that we have the ref hooked up, we could use that here, and instead of a static value, we will go ahead and use our ref and fetch the current value. Then let's see if that works. That works. Yeah, there we go. And the last thing that we want to do is to get this delete button working. So you guessed it, we will have to add an on-click handler here and define another function. Let's call it delete to do, and this will take an argument which will specify which to do needs to be deleted. So let's call it to do dot title, and we don't want to execute this here right away, so we will define this function here. This will take an argument, we'll call it a task. What we want to do is mock the deletion of a particular to do in the list on the UI. So we'll create a filtered array or a filtered list, if you may, and use the data array that we already have and use the filter method on it. And we want to filter out the existing title. So we'll do element dot title not equal to the existing task that we have. And now that we have the filtered array, we will update the state using this function here again and update that with the filtered list. Now, depending on your application, this may or may not be optimal, but just for the sake of this exercise and see what goes where, this would be the core functionality of the To-Do app that we are aiming to create. So let's save that, refresh, try to add something. Can't spell today. Okay, adding works. If I want to do something else, oh my god, I really can't type today. So, and the delete button also seems to work. There we go. We have that, and we have our ugly looking functional To-Do app ready. So this is kind of what is expected as a bare minimum in a front-end React interview, in my experience at least. And in my opinion, kind of knowing how to do these kind of things should be second nature, because that will kind of give you a good foundation. Now, obviously this app is in no way optimal, and there could be a lot of variations that could be asked in an interview, in a live coding round, such as what happens if we add the same element with the same title twice, and if you delete this, why both of them go away. Now, the reason for that is, since we're passing in the title to the delete function and filtering the list based off of the title, it will filter all the tasks or the to-dos with the same title in that particular list or an array. So that could be one additional question, or there could be other cross questioning, like is it really important, or what can you do instead of updating the state every time? Would it be a costly operation for larger applications? Now, depending on which position or which level of position that you're applying for, depth would be tested. But this is a very good starting point, and if you want to build on top of this, try to improve this app, that'd be great. For example, you could add CSS to this, put the code in different components, separate these things out, and try to integrate other hooks, such as useEffect is another really important hook which handles state changes and DOM rendering. Another variation would be to fetch data from another source, maybe an API. You could use Fetch API or Axios to do that instead of using this original data which we have hard-coded here. So you could think about more variations, try to build on top of this, keep adding to it, and basically just keep at it. So I guess that's all for this video, guys. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.